Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, one of your hosts, and with me as always is my other jubilant host,
Brian. Hi.
How are you doing, Brian? Surging down the information superhighway.
What? Why?
We're transmitting across the electronic radio waves with our podcast.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Are you excited? I'm excited. I'm happy to hear making content.
It is the 3rd of November 2020, which means that it's the day of the 2020 presidential election in the United States of America, which unfortunately remains fascinating outside of the country, even though, you know, we hate it. We hate that we have to think about it. We don't like that. But it is fascinating. So, yeah, I mean, like, if you're listening to this afterwards, I remember there was like a break with every podcast airing between like during the last election, where it was like there was like a pre-Trump era and a post-Trump era. It
was like the rings in a tree you could see, and I found it particularly stressful catching up on older podcasts because there was just this you don't know what's coming kind of wall that would hit,
and like it could be really good, and it's like no I couldn't.
In Irish political news, there's a News Talk FM presenter protesting outside of the doll dressed as a celery.
Well, no, he's not.
He's claiming it's a leak.
Yeah, because the previous prime minister, previous
Taoiseach, Brian, the guillotine for that.
The previous Taoiseach and current Taoiseach is has leaked some information, potentially badly. Who knows?
Yeah, but apparently, you know, obviously, and the funny joke is he's dressed as a leak and it's about leaking documents, etc. But apparently, there's evidence they've used the costume before to portray a celery in a different context.
I mean, why not? News Talk aren't exactly the most stellar organisation of all time.
So here we are, as you may have obviously guessed, to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, so this is season 5, episode 12. It's called Checkpoint. It was directed by Nick Mark. That's CK.
I find people with two first names suspicious. It's probably irrational.
Yeah, you comment on it all the time, and I'm always like, great, okay, that's wonderful. But whatever.
Thank you.
He last directed Fool for Love. It was written by Doug Petrie and Jane Espenson. Doug Petrie last wrote Fool for Love, and Jane Espenson last wrote Triangle, which was the last episode. So that's fair enough. And here is your Buffy and summary. A delegation from the council arrives, insisting that Buffy pass tests and threatening Giles with deportation. They interview the Scoobies and Spike. Glory confronts Buffy in the Summers home, and threatens her family and friends. Buffy's attacked by the Knights of Byzantium, fanatics keen to destroy the key. Buffy tells the council that her real power rests with her. They tell her that Glory is a god. Just generally real power. I think they meant to say their real power, right?
Potentially. Okay, so before we continue with more patented discourse, I think for our bronze band we want to talk about the spooky season and the Halloween hits and new films that we watched.
So on Saturday, which was Halloween, we obviously sat down to watch a couple of good horror movies. I chose Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, I think your official choice was Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Also known as Nightmare on Elm Street 7. Yeah,
and we'll talk about that in a second, because that's probably the most interesting one. And then the kind of wild card we stuck in there, we were going to go with Jennifer's Body, which I haven't seen. You maybe have. But Netflix released a horror movie the day before Halloween, which we weren't aware of in advance, called His House, which I hadn't heard about it at all previously. I don't know the director at all. I think it was his directorial debut. Featured the same actress who played Ruby in Lovecraft Country. It was very fascinating. It was really unusual, genuinely quite scary. It was about two migrants who arrive in London from the Sudan.
To my read, it's ambiguous in the film, specifically where in Africa they're from. And I think it's also, I would make the argument it's ambiguous whether they're in London or not.
Yeah, sure.
So they are migrants arriving through the asylum seeking system into the UK.
I think they've arrived on a very unsafe boat. Yeah. And which has had some casualties, which is pretty upsetting. And they have arrived and they're now seeking asylum. And yeah, no, you're right. It is kind of ambiguous if it's the UK, if it's London. I think the Wikipedia page lists the location of their origin as South Sudan. I'm not sure. Okay, I feel like the Sudan. I'm like, you know, the way when you say the Ukraine is actually just super offensive because the country's called Ukraine and it's like pure Russian
propaganda.
Yeah. I'm just like, I really shouldn't be saying the Sudan.
We don't know.
No, I'm not sure.
Yeah. But anyways, to the point, it's a film, a fresh new horror film that's very much positioned from the angle that good horror films often take, which is take social issues, take cultural issues, and hide them and transpose them through the lens of horror, and very much placed in the migrant experience in the UK and from their perspective. So I think the note that stuck out to me specifically was, you know, when they're being moved from their initial asylum centre to their housing, and they're not told where they're going, they're not really getting much information, and when they get there and they meet with their caseworker, played for some reason by Max Smith of Doctor Who fame,
one of the most like mixed like characterization roles of all time. Like at the beginning he seems like an evil character, he seems like an evil character throughout, and at the end he has like a good old laugh with him. Yeah, it's like, okay. But
in that conversation they ask him where they are, and they're like, is this London? And he says something like, sure, why not? Yeah. So I think that's a kind of an interesting point. But yeah, the house that they're placed in is by all standards absolutely dilapidated, but it's treated as kind of appropriate accommodation, and there's all these restrictions on them where they can't
have friends over, they can't
use candles, they can't work, etc. So and they're limited obviously in terms of what their agency are, because they have no money and few contacts and all that kind of stuff. So I actually thought that was kind of a really interesting and naturalistic way to impose the restrictions you get in a horror film. Like a horror film has to be, people can't get you dark, yeah, exactly, you can't turn the lights on, it's too dark, you can't just go and call the police, etc. And all that was really built into the reality of their situation before the spooky scary starts happening. So I thought it was quite clever.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, like, you know, it's a great way to say that the, you know, minorities are a great vector for horror, and I don't mean vector in a dehumanizing way.
Viewpoint as well.
Yeah, because I mean, like, you know, minorities are often without. That's kind of like the starting point. Yeah, it's very interesting, and the whole thing kind of looks at the ideas of, like, you know, assimilation versus kind of bringing, or assimilation versus like, you know, having the society you're in adapt to who you are, and also just, like, you know, the very classic horror trope of the horror that you bring with you overseas while moving country. Obviously, in traditional horror, when you get like early American horror, the thematic approach that they take to the origins of horror is that it's being brought from the old country, you know, in some situations, and then in other situations it's the stolen land. In this situation, it's the horror has been brought from the old country, but also is a minority horror, and it's very, or a horror structure. It's very, very fascinating. I think what we decided was very, very effective in ways. Messaging was a bit mixed. Performances are great. Visually was great. I found the soundtrack really crap.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, it's not something I would parse from it, but I think he found the actual, literally the music of it reasonably generic or ill-placed at times.
Yeah, it was really sincere at points where there was actually no need for it to be, and stuff like that. Anyway, but definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, and they are both, I found out they're both British Nigerian actors.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so because, like, obviously an element, I think, from the writing and directing of it, attempting to portray a subject-led point of view. And yeah, I thought the horror of it was, there's no clear, it's like it's one of these horror films that falls on the spectrum, but like it's not out to purely scare you in a jump scare kind of sense, because there's not always clear who's the villainous, who has the power and who doesn't have the power, and also the horror which they're trying to observe from where they've come from is also an element of the culture that they've had to leave behind, and there's an attractiveness to that. So it's nicely like ambiguous, I thought.
Yeah, it was definitely worth a watch. It was very good. I probably like 7.5.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a horror film, that's pretty.
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
good at times. Yeah, we've watched much worse horror films.
Oh god, yeah. We then watched Silence of the Lambs, traditional. I mean, like, horror ? Maybe a thriller. I was doing loads of reading around it because, like, obviously there was lots of objection to it at the time in terms of its portrayal of Bill as, you know, potentially the only portrayal of a trans person that lots of people have ever seen, and that's continued to this day. Buffalo Bill. It's a very unusual one. I don't know. I don't know if it does stand up in that way, but in every other way, it is an exemplary mode of filmmaking.
It's actually interesting. Obviously, we can only speak adjacently to the trans themes, such as they are in Silence of the Lambs, but my overarching opinion about it, or kind of my stock opinion, has been that it's quite a damaging portrayal of a trans person, or more accurately, of trans associated or adjacent issues that the public view in public would just say, oh, that's, in the language of the film, that's a transsexual person, that's a cross-dresser, and so on and so forth. I would continue to say that I think with the level of detail that the average person probably remembers the film, and the lack of seeing anything around those themes in most media, probably still a bad association to make in people's minds. But that being said, the film itself, I will say, even for the time, is fairly explicit that Bill isn't, in the language of the time, transsexual. He just thinks he is, and that his various other pathologies are expressing themselves in ways that are superficially similar, but absolutely not. And particularly Clarice Starling specifically says that people who do have gender dysphoria or etc. at the time, they're not aggressive or violent in any way. It's not one of the the aspects of the experience. So that is present in the film. It's just
it holds the weight of being the only portrayal of there's a good chance that the majority of people who have watched that movie have never seen any representation of any trans person otherwise, or that's the only signifier in their mind of trans issues. So that's a real problem.
I would say in terms of the horror of Silence of the Lambs, obviously one of your favorite films, I think it's fair to say.
Yes.
It is very restrained at times compared to what we might get in an average film these days.
It's not grisly.
It's not necessarily grisly, but my God, is stressful and horrific, and it's a very effective, I think, portrayal of what you don't see being well leveraged. And I think about it a lot during it, because my younger sister has been watching more content which I think would traditionally consider having elements of scares, like Jaws.
She's obsessed with Stranger Things specifically. Even she's never seen it, but
she has now. I've given it the benediction. She's watched the first season now.
She's turning 13 in April.
Yeah.
That's 15s or so. So it's like, it's not probably like I probably would have been watching it at the time when I was younger at that age. But like, it's about the right.
But what is making me think of is she's watched Jaws. I don't know why I say it with kind of a French accent there initially. She watched Stranger Things. She's watched a few kind of Annabelle adjacent kind of things. And Annabelle's actually a bad example, because the one thing she is afraid of is dolls. But she finds any of the tension completely boring.
Oh, really?
Like Jaws, she just like nothing happens and you don't see the shark. And I wonder if, like, I do feel that quality, and you're Alien and you obviously going further back, Psycho and Halloween, very little happens stabby wise in these films. True. But like, I think it is there, and I just wonder, I sometimes, maybe this is an old person thing to say, I wonder if the youngest generation
the lack of attention span.
No, it's not the lack of attention span, but like, can they, if they are seeing more people blowing up on watching Disney's the Descendants, like, can they actually imagine?
I remember watching Alien for the first time, but it was on VHS, and like, I was sitting in my front room, like middle of the day, like totally bright, and I was fucking terrified the entire time. I don't know. We should then move on to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Very fascinating, bizarre movie where where the actor from the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, whose name I cannot remember, but the lead actress,
Heather Langenkamp, who plays Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, it's about her as an actor in the real world, and Freddy coming to haunt her and her son, basically. Yeah, so
the premise is of Wes Craven, who wrote Nightmare on Elm Street. The premise of the film is that the demonic entity, the manifestation of fear and nightmare in the real world, was trapped by Wes Craven in writing A Nightmare on Elm Street, and now that the film series ended on kind of a flat note, it's now being released into the world as menacing the actors. Now, this might sound like something you've seen on any number of Community episodes or Scrubs or whatever, but at the time it was released, pre-Scream and all that, it was much more innovative, and it was considered to be one of the early examples of that kind of metatextual play with that. So it still is fresh, I think, in terms of how it approaches it.
It was visually and just acting wise and production very high quality and much better than you'd ever expect from a 7th movie in a series. It was quite good.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting cultural artifact, and I think there is some real horror in it, and there's a real effort to make Freddy Krueger, or as you insisted on calling him, Freddie Mercury, genuinely kind of menacing and horrific, where he literally got to the point in Nightmare on Elm Street where he was a talk show host.
Yeah, sure.
And actually tying back to that family theme, my father, who is not by any stretch an easily scared person, because he watched A Nightmare on Elm Street when he was I think 17 or 18, maintains it's the only film that he's still scared of. He sat up after watching it for the first time with the lights on all night. So I don't think that experience would translate to a 17-year-old.
Not quite. Bad. Okay. Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah. So speaking of horror coming from inside the house, in this episode of Buffy, we find an escalating confrontation with Glory. We find that the Watchers Council, or as they're referred to in this episode at times, the Council of Watchers, or the Council of Watchers of the United Kingdom, descend en masse on the magic box, because they've got some information on Glory in their grubby paws, and they want to test Buffy to make certain that she is sufficiently appropriate to the Slayer to handle the information. And that's the meat of the episode, essentially.
Obviously, the most interesting thing about this episode being just I think it's a great episode. I really enjoy it. I remember very vividly from being quite young watching it, and the scene where Buffy's handing their ass to them while the Scoobs all watch from the rafters or whatever it is, or the
rafters. I think it's very it's technically on the second floor or whatever, but it feels raftery.
Yeah, is very stuck in my brain as a very iconic image of the Scooby Gang. It's a very good episode. The most interesting thing about it is the content delivers to us about the Watchers Council. This is the primary Watcher Council episode where you get what the Watcher Council is, and the next time they appear, essentially they blow up.
Yeah, they really do. I will be endlessly fascinated with the way that the Buffyverse insists on giving you almost no information about the things that are usually the fodder for info dumps in most fantasy texts. Every text wants you to know about its Watchers or its Keepers or so on and so forth. And in this, we get as much information as is kind of necessary to motivate the plot, to give the sense that there's dozens and dozens of what it's about. Actually, I think the reason why this episode is the way it is because they want to convey that the Watchers Council is actually a huge multinational complex organization with a lot of power and sway, and it's all held together by the linchpin of this 17-year-old girl, whatever Slayer it might be. Do you know what I mean? And that's actually a massive weak point that undermines their entire patriarchal kind of structure. I mean,
it's a great metaphor. Yeah. It's such a great it's a great little thing that they construct here in terms of patriarchy and the idea of the kind of oppressive force of traditional structures where the people at the top are only in power so long as the people below them are convinced en masse that they need the people on top. It's a very Marxist episode, I would suggest, as well. So, I mean, the conclusion that Buffy comes to by the end of the episode, where she has her kind of aha moment and realizes that she's in the position of power, they need her far more than she needs them. They have no purpose without her. They are a body without a hand. Is fascinating. It's really good.
I think there's obviously, from an American perspective, in terms of producing the series, is some great value, I think, to how they position it as, England, essentially, because there's all this slightly nebulous structure of hereditary and heraldry and pomp and circumstance and all that kind of stuff. Quentin Travers being the most distilled English man you could possibly meet. You know, someone literally, like, without him asking, serves him a cup of tea while he's opening his files. You know,
yeah. A woman specifically.
A woman, and he's very blunt in that misogyny, where he says that the Slayer is nothing but an instrument. That the council and jurors on the Slayer is essentially expendable, and that it's up to them to determine if she's. And there's all this classism of it as well, where it's like, I presume you know the Japanese words, the Aikido words for what, and go, obviously she doesn't. And as she says in her confrontation, they're asking her questions they know that she can't answer. So yeah, it's really fascinating from that point of view. And as I mentioned during the episode, is one of the Buffy novels I have here on the bookshelf. Slayer is a relatively recent release, and it's set in a Watcher-led academy for Slayers post Chosen, and almost every, it's a young adult novel. Almost every teenager in it is a child or a grandchild of one of the many Watchers who appears in this episode. So I think the main Malfoy type character is Quentin Travers' granddaughter. There's obviously a lot of information coming from this. And yeah, so it has a paradigm shift in terms of her relationship with the council. I think this is probably one of the strongest checkpoints in her progression towards eventually taking control of the entire Slayer line at the end of the show, because she, and that
redistribution of wealth and power and autonomy, which again, great feminist message of saying, I was bestowed power by this patriarchal structure, by resting through like this like abuse of a young woman a long time ago, and through the abuse of many women over time, because that's what the council has done, is that they've wrested control from this woman to like fit their structures and etc. And by the end of the show saying, everyone who can be that is that, and I don't need to be the only one. It's I mean, say what you will about the Buffy conclusion, it's a strong approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And the episode gives, tension, conflict, disagreement of ideology is essential for a lot of great kind of ensemble moments, and it gives just so much opportunity for the gang to have to be interviewed by various variations on these Oxbridge Watchers and just feel like that they don't live up to the standard. One of Tara's all times great lines has to be, walks around with the Watchers. I just thought they're more Gileses. I always thought that English people were nicer than normal people.
Which, I mean, like, hilarious. Yeah. English people are worse than normal people. I'm just kidding. But also, colonialism did happen.
Yeah,
and that was not great. As Irish people are allowed to say that.
I think we can finally just come out and paint our colours to mass and say that as a podcast we are against colonialism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say English people are worse than normal people. That's probably not great. Well, it's already happened. You're saying that, but the best thing Tara ever said is definitely everything she says during that interaction with the Watcher, where her and Willow are being interviewed about their relationship to Buffy, and they mistake this for being about their relationship to each other, and they're like, "We're just good friends. Yeah, very good friends. Yeah, very good friends. Actually, no, we are girlfriends. We are lesbian, gay type girlfriends. Is
gay type lovers."
Did they say that?
Lesbian gay type lovers.
Okay. Yeah. That was pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Many an MSN Messenger handle was probably lesbian gay type lovers or something to that effect.
Pretty more AOL Messenger. AIM. Yeah. But yeah, it was.
Oh, and we're overlooking what is definitely one of your favorite parts of the episode.
Which one?
Anya Christina Emmanuel Jenkins.
Yeah.
Of Oklahoma.
I had both a mother and a father.
Anya desperately attempting to appear human and normal. Born on the 4th of July.
If you think that, there's never a joke made about that, you think again.
Yeah,
it was pretty great.
She's very tactful.
I think Anya in this season is really blossoming into something very wonderful. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, hopefully it works out for her in the end.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll do great. So yeah, it's a weird episode. It's kind of lacking in structure in some ways. There's no rise and crescendo. There's no linear plot, and that's one of the things about season 5 is that there's a lot of incremental plot development. So in this episode, you get Buffy being tested by the Watchers. You kind of have that confrontation initially began in season 3 with the Cruciamentum. I'm not sure why I said that. So weird. Cruciamentum, which has now come to a head. And while Buffy left the Watchers Council in season 3 entirely, she is now using them essentially to her own devices, and they've paid Giles retroactively for the time that he wasn't working there, and they will use the Watchers Council's resources, but otherwise they're an independent kind of force, which I think is an interesting approach to it, and definitely good. Otherwise, elsewhere in the episode, you have a lot of Glory stuff, and Claire Kramer looking like absolutely just incredible. So she looks so beautiful. I always think with this kind of TV show and this kind of like 90s lighting and like, you know, makeup and clothing, that you must look back in it in your 40s and 50s and say, God, I look fucking amazing, great. Yeah. Like, imagine Sarah Michelle Gellar getting to watch all of Buffy except for the part where she had a broken fringe and be like, God, that was nice.
I think I always suspect. I wonder if Sarah Michelle Gellar says something.
Not to suggest that either of them are not incredibly beautiful now. They are.
Yeah, but I wonder if there's something to this effect that she said before. But I think it's fascinating how you can be part of something so culturally iconic, and when you show it to your kids, they're probably like, whatever.
Has she said that before?
I feel like I've heard her say something that our kids aren't particularly interested, and I know that a lot of people who have been on, say, Doctor Who and Star Trek and all that kind of stuff have been like, no, everyone's just like, this is like some NAFO program.
Yeah, I remember I said to one of my cousins to watch Buffy, and she was like, maybe. And I was like, because I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I should recommend it to her. It might be too adult content for her, or like, but I think she might really love it. And then when I said it, she was like, nah, that's fine.
It was like, I mentioned this to you, I stumbled across an internet hole on YouTube of a small YouTuber who was explaining Stargate SG-1, but one of the videos was how to force your spouse to watch the TV show, and I was like, pros and cons. If you and I had extraordinarily different interests in this area, I think it would cause perhaps more conflict. If I was like, I want to watch Buffy, and you were like, let's put on Top Gear, which is how I think you would be if you were elsewise.
Yeah, I mean, like, in fairness, the dichotomy is there in the sense that that's why straight people can't stay in relationships and gay people can.
Or Top Gear.
Is because like the men in straight relationships want to watch Top Gear and the women want to watch good stuff, and gays like to watch good stuff too.
Yeah.
So
it's a superpower.
Yeah, being the straight man is just leads automatically to bad taste.
God, we're firing shocks across a lot of areas in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, like at all those, like, you know, poor minority classes that no one will protect, like, you know, the straight people and the English.
Yeah. Also Americans, because we said we hate American politics.
Oh fuck! Kind of I mean, yeah, another incredibly looked down upon culture.
When we started this podcast, I was like, I have to be very careful not to say anything controversial.
No,
not offend anyone. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, in terms of Glory, I've said this before. I like Glory. Mm-hmm. I like the energy she brings to seeing. I think it is fascinating to have something, and again, something that is overplayed, I think, layering the Buffyverse, but something which is just demonstrably outside of Buffy's power range. Yeah. But I feel
you do get the sense that like Buffy just cannot take her on physically.
I think it's so essential to establish that, because everything else she's had to deal with so far, she has actually been able to deal with physically and directly.
Well, she could apparently not Adam.
Adam, she was just like, I'll get to that eventually. That's what happened with Adam. He's in a cave somewhere. He's dead, Joe. He's in one of those rooms they keep NPCs before they deploy them into the game. Yeah,
it's not just like underground and then just like lift them up.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But with Glory, I think that you have to lean heavily on the idea that her mental instability from being in this dimension is what is delaying her plans, because there's really no great story reason why she can't just take Buffy apart. And I know Buffy has this revelation about her having something that Glory wants, but like she could just like break all Buffy's fingers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
there's a directness that is lacking in her plan, I think. Yeah.
I agree, but I think that's just like plot armor, you know, in the sense that like, you know, it doesn't make for a good season if like, you know, the first thing that Glory does, well, it might, like, it kind of is what the first thing that Glory did was like beat the shit out of Buffy, you know? Yeah,
exactly. And I think her relationship to Ben is just so ambiguous when you don't know what's happening. It's such a question mark what's happening there. And I think one of the first clues you get to it in this episode is her saying, "I wish I could get my hands on him." I was like, "Why can't you?" But yeah, I actually think something this episode brought forward for me as well is I didn't think I liked Glory's weird scabby minions, but they're all kind of reasonably funny.
You see, that's interesting because the good one is introduced in this episode, and that's Jinx, and he's like just this bizarre, like so happy to be there and like silly and stupid, and he's like just by far the best one. But yeah, I think he only got introduced for the first time in this episode. I might be wrong there, but yeah, he was prevalent in this episode, and he was like, "Oh, beautiful Glorificus one," and she was all like, "I love you, you scabby weirdo," and she was hugging him and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're good. I think the highlight of the episode in terms of the comedic content, I think there were two highs. There were three highs. There was the scene with Glory, obviously, where she comes into Buffy's house. We weren't sure about how she found her. I think it was probably just the phone book, realistically.
She could have done that at any point.
Yeah. But she finds Buffy. Well, no, she didn't. Oh, no, sorry, she did know. Okay, she told Ben that Buffy was a vampire slayer in this episode.
Yeah.
But she finds Buffy. She goes to the house. Unlike vampires, she has an ability to cross the threshold. It's very, I think it's very much trying to introduce a theme which will be really picked up on in the body, which is this kind of idea of horror crossing the threshold and coming into the home,
the safe house and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, aggressively trampling on what was understood to be safe. But and that was a very interesting transgression and interaction between Buffy and Glory, where Glory, like, it's kind of teasing Dawn, and Dawn's like, "I'm going to figure it out, Buffy, what the key is. I know I'm involved somehow." And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then when she leaves, Glory very casually says, "Yeah, I'm going to murder her and your mom, basically, if you don't tell me where the key is," which is not great. The other two moments are, I think the comedic high point of the episode is definitely the interviews with the Scooby Gang. Xander being asked what the fuck he actually does here. He's like, nothing. He was like, "I was the heart in the
Buffy sandwich.
Buffy sandwich." Willow and Tara being interviewed and
being asked whether they were registered witches.
Oh god, yeah. And then the other high point, of course, being Buffy's triumphant sports movie speech at the end of the episode, being like, "I don't need you, you need me."
There's actually a moment where she lays down the law, and Quentin's like, "Oh, your terms are acceptable," and there's actually a sports movie like swell of music, and
everyone cheers. The whole
everyone
bus
cheers. I think, yeah, exactly. I think Giles like wipes a tear away. It's bizarre. Awful, awfully cringy. But I think something what Buffy doesn't do a lot is cliffhangers, and this has probably one of my favorite cliffhangers of the entire series.
It's very like well timed. It's that very traditional Joss Whedon verbal take, or cinematographical take, which is like, drop something, have a very underwhelming reaction, and then cut. So the line is Quentin Trapper saying, "She's not a demon, she's a god," and Buffy goes, "Oh,
yeah,"
that's it.
Yeah, so I find that quite evocative, and I did use that in our Dungeons and Dragons campaign at one point.
I'm sure you did. I wasn't listening.
It was right at the start.
Okay.
Yeah, it was my big end of first session kind of like kick up the heat move. So yeah, overall, it's actually just loads going on in the episode, because we've mentioned there's Ben stuff, there's loads of council stuff. They've introduced a third faction in the Glory Wars, Knights of Byzantium, and elsewhere there's Spike trying very hard to figure out how to be a helpful good guy, and fighting vampires with her, and then eventually her having to specifically rely on him by putting Dawn and Joyce in his crypt, so they can watch Passions together. So yeah, a busy episode. So I think effective in how it manages to relatively balance all those different elements.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's good. I think there's the interview with Spike then as well, is quite comedic, but not hugely comedic at the same time. He's kind of like asked about Buffy, and he has very conflicting emotions about whether he should big her up or tell him that she's awful,
or neg her, basically. I guess she does a lot of that in the episode, or just telling her that like her beauty's fading and no one will want her and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he doesn't just tell her her beauty's fading. He tells her that her like breasts are sagging.
Yeah, he does.
It's so unusual.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, whatever. Okay. feel like it's early, but do we move into the...
Absolutely. Let's slip and slide into the dusting.
Into the dusting, okay. The characters of Lydia and Quentin Travers, Lydia being the woman who's shocked at everything.
Did her thesis on Spike, which is what I remember about her. Yeah.
Fucking, like,
it's a great line. It's a fantastic line.
I feel like it's been replicated in something else as well. Maybe it was just, did Wesley say something similar? Anyway. So she reappears in season 7, as does Quentin, and they're swiftly blown up. Yeah, and like I had a big question mark about, like, what the checkpoint of the episode was. Is it that this is a point of no return? It's kind of just after the midway point of the season, so maybe that's part of it. Is it a checkpoint of Buffy's adult life? That she's gotten to the point where she's hit a level of emancipation and freedom from the kind of patriarchal structures? Is it a checkpoint for glory?
Can I suggest as well that one of the scenes we didn't even touch on was her in college and in a lecture with an incredibly condescending lecturer who I think easily replicates the same kind of misogyny and condescension she gets from Quentin.
Yes.
And also the misogyny and condescension we see from so many lecturers in university of a certain generation, I believe.
Oh yeah.
It was very infuriatingly familiar, but I think this is also a checkpoint in her really moving on from that part of her life where she's like, oh, my life is going to be maybe go to university or get a job, etc. No, it's going to be like the rest of the season is about how the Slayer is the main thing she will have to do for the rest of her life. Yeah no,
absolutely. Otherwise, I'm trying to think if I have any other like significant like notes that are Buffy Bits. Like, there were very few, like, I was very, like, no one wrote about this episode. There were very few, like, notes in the Buffy wiki about it, which have been very surprising for what I find to be a very memorable and very enjoyable episode. But whatever. Joel, do you have any Buffy Bits?
So I appreciated in terms of Buffy Bits in that lecture that they implied that Rasputin potentially was
a vampire.
Actually a vampire, supernatural in some respect. Like, that's an off dug well, but like, it's funny.
It is.
And also the odd note in the episode of Buffy finding Riley's jumper and Xander being like, oh, Riley clothes.
Yeah, and then later on in the episode when Buffy's talking about how Xander has clocked more hours in the field than any of you or something like that, and they're like, that's Riley speak. It's like, you're really trying to shoehorn the Riley references in here. Actually, one interesting note is that Buffy says that the Vikings discovered America in the 1400s. They didn't. It was around 1000 AD, which is whatever.
That could just be a Buffy mistake. Yeah,
it could be, and also whatever.
We also see in this episode.
I mean, to be honest, the people who discovered America were Native Americans. You fucking idiots! Like, you don't have to. It's not discovery if someone's already there. You made contact. Well done.
It's not discovery if someone's already there. I think it's pretty much the last line on that.
Yeah.
We see Spike dust a vamp, which I don't know if we've seen him do before, not very frequently, and we rarely see vampires actually stake other vampires.
Yeah, I'm not sure about dusting. He certainly fights a lot of them in terms of, that's a real revelation for him in season 4 when he finds out he can fight evil, and that's like, a relief for him.
But I think that image of a vampire staking a vampire is meant to be, oh, look at this dog walking on its hind legs a little bit. It's very incongruous. And we also have Dawn make reference to the Sunnydale Junior High School. I'm like, where is that?
We're going to see it in a couple episodes.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait. Is season 7 when Buffy... I don't really understand, like, kindergarten or... What's...
K through 12 is a thing.
Is K through 12 one school?
I think...
No, it's elementary school. It's kindergarten and elementary school, middle school, and then high school. Is that right?
Yeah, but there is such a thing as junior high school. I think in practice it probably varies depending on where you live.
Junior high must be middle school, I think. But anyway.
We don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know what age you start high school at. I think it must be 14 or so. But I think Dawn's first year of high school is in the new Sunnydale High School in season 7, which is 2 years away. But... that would make her 16, and maybe like some places high school gets split into two things where it's juniors and seniors.
Yeah, I suspect that what is most commonly categorized as high school in America is actually what our senior school would be, or kind of our later secondary schools.
Ireland's way easier. It's just you go to primary school and then secondary school.
Yeah, and sometimes you go to a girls' school.
Yeah, well, sometimes you do.
So
Okay.
in terms of fashion for this episode, what jumps out at you, Brian?
Yeah, sure. So at the beginning of the episode, Buffy is wearing a top with a Greek vase on it for some reason. It was bizarre. Dawn's wearing cereal pajamas, which I thought were actually kind of great. It was a very nice print. I thought the postman who Glory drains, his makeup was just wild. It was like the whole scene that they shot that
I know
in,
that as well, yeah.
it was overexposed to fuck, and he just looked like he didn't look drained. He looked like dead.
Like, yeah, it's like, exactly. He looked like a corpse. It was so performatively like he is different now makeup, yeah.
Yeah. Clark Kramer looks great throughout. She just wears like very like, very, 90s supermodel kind of clothes. And Buffy's wearing the dangliest, largest cross necklace of all time at one point. It's like,
because she's a slayer.
I'm pretty sure that's the one that she takes the cocaine out of in Cruel Intention.
Yeah.
But and then at the end of the episode, I think I only got a slight glimmer of it, but I think Dawn is wearing a leather jacket that's multicolored, like rainbow colored, and I was like, that's kind of like, that's what you'd put Buffy's little sister in.
Queen.
she's a drag.
We also see a lot of Giles' chest hair in this episode. He's
I didn't
wearing a very
notice that.
low cut shirt, very open shirt.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is probably contrasting with how button up and turtlenecky all of the English are.
Yeah, and the English people throughout are just wearing shit clothes.
Like, just the kind of clothes a schoolmaster might wear in the 1950s.
Yeah. Okay, death count, Joel.
Yeah, just one vamp, staked by Spike, while Buffy is shouting unrelated things in his face. Yeah.
Great.
So death-free for the most part.
Yeah. And what rating would you give this episode?
What rating would I give this episode? I think I'll give this a solid, on the nose, 8.0, expertly flung broadswords.
Great, tell me about that.
I think I have to, it is not as structurally pure and thematically potent as some of the greatest episodes of Buffy, but I love the information we get about the Watchers Council and how the gang interacts with it. I love the codification of the gang in the sense of this is what we do, this is what we do. It's very clear structure. And I love the effectiveness and the simplicity of imbuing the big bag of this season with genuine threat by making her a god.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably give it 8.3 lesbian gay type lovers out of 10. Again, the word lover is giving me all sorts of like North England to my voice for some reason. Lover is what I say. I don't go too guttural with the or. Lover. Anyway. Round lover. So that's what I would give it out of 10. I quite like it. I have quite a soft spot for it. I think it's very enjoyable. I think the dynamics are great. I think the structure of the episode is a little lacking, but it has very enjoyable Jane Espenson kind of energy to it, where she's not trying to say something absolutely insane about Native Americans, which is great. Okay, should we move on to the Cordelia Chase then?
Absolutely. So this week on the Cordelia Chase over at Angel : the series, we watched Blood Money.
If you say so.
You're establishing a pattern of every week you can't remember the episode of Angel we watched.
I can remember it. I just think it was shit, which is very unusual because I was preparing my mouth to say that was bad, and you were like, that was quite good actually.
I enjoyed it. I tell you why I enjoyed it, because the center point of the episode is that the gang are continue to be separated. Angel is off on a singular mission to fuck with Wolf from Heart, and specifically Lindsay and Lila, and the rest of the gang are just having hijinks trying to make business cards. It's very disconnected in that respect, but in the course of his attempt to mess up Lila and Lindsay's plans, he gets involved with a homeless children's center, which is a shelter, which is run by a woman called Ang, who is in fact once Lily, once Chanterelle, who has appeared in Buffy twice. So she appeared as Lily in the episode Ang at the opening of season 3, and at the end of that episode took on Buffy's pseudonym of Ang and her life and her waitressing job, and previously to that was involved with the vampire cult
in Lied to Me in season 2.
And I think that Ang is a great character. I think that she acts the role very well. She acts 3 different evolutions of a person's life very well. She does reappear later in Angel towards the end of the show, and kind of does maintain some semblance of what life is like for people on the ground and the practicality of it. And yeah, I think she has a weirdly very effective character arc over the course of 2 shows for what is probably a character most people don't actually remember.
Yeah, sure.
So I all of that gives it a sweet spot for me. I think the rest of it is about like Angel trying to disrupt a charity auction that they have, and also his old friend, a demon called Boone, who initially makes it look like he wants to help the Wolfram Hearts assassinate Angel, but he's actually working for him. It's a convoluted attempt to do a heist film with your twists and turns, but like many average heist plots, when you look at it for a second, it's like, this does not make any sense, this plan. It really falls apart. And we get more tension in terms of this, specifically that the Wolfram Hearts stuff codifies and focuses on that Angel is destined to be a major player in the apocalypse, which will happen, but it's not clear if he'll fight for the forces of light or the forces of evil, and that's kind of why they're pushing and pulling him. And why? By
clarification, do you mean they repeat it for like the 20th time this season?
They actually haven't said that before. They've said various things about how he's important, it'd be good to have him on side, but this was the episode where it's like, it's actually part of the prophecy. There's a reason why we can't just out and kill him, which I think is useful plot armor to have. Yeah, sure. Because otherwise, again, it's a bit like this massive firm and this massive evil entity and one little old vampire. And the comedy with the rest of the gang, while entirely disconnected, is funny. We see Cordelia's audition tape is broadcast on the big screen, and one of my favorite lines, understated lines, is her kind of drinking a cup of milk and going, milk, and then going, why don't I have more work? And Wesley, for some reason, and this is like an old-timey video camera tapes, so the efficacy,
you know why though, right? It's 100% a Star Wars kid reference, I think.
So just to explain what he does, he starts like dancing and he's fighting, but also stripping his clothes off in front of it, and did a Sean Connery reference actually, which is timely.
Well, like
sad when people die, but
Sean
Connery was not a good person.
He like by all accounts wasn't. He also he apologized for that, like that comment he made about hitting women being okay. I mean, I'm not sure how much apologizing you can do about saying that, like, but anyway. One for another time.
One for another time. A messy situation amongst many other messy situations, and they're still trying to walk this line with Angel, where he has some of the mannerisms of Angelus, and some of the. I always find interesting that Dave Boreanaz plays as his villainous character as so happy and jokey, but while walking the line of still being Angel. So yeah, an all over the place episode, but with some bits on the plate that were tasty, but didn't come together as a cohesive meal. So I'd say maybe 5 failed feminist gestures.
I'm going to say 5 failed feminist gestures, and I thought I'm being generous with that. But Joel, that's a very high number for an episode that you turned to me right afterwards, as I've already said, and said, that was good, wasn't it?
Do you mean very low?
It's very low for that.
Well, this is how you play the game. You can't hate me for playing games. It's just how we do things.
Okay. Let's wrap up. That's enough for that for this week. From me and from us. Good night and good luck.
So thanks very much for listening. Hope you're safe, hope you're well. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. It does make our day. And otherwise, tell your friends, tell your patriarchs. And we will see you. No, we won't. We'll hear you. You'll hear us next time on Buffy Boys.
What if we're someone's patriarchs, Joel?
That's the dream.
What if we are? Maybe we're like oppressing someone.
It's patriarchs all the way down, Brian.
Oh no. Okay, see you.
See ya, Buffy Boys.
To make it sound like you're saying bye, Buffy Boys.